The stars stretched endlessly across the dark sky, but among them one figure seemed brighter than any star to James. He had never seen anyone like her before. The alien princess, Lyra, stood at the balcony's edge of the palace, her silver hair glowing softly in the light of distant suns. Her eyes, violet and deep like the night sky, scanned the horizon, as if she could see every secret of the galaxy. To James, she looked untouchable, distant and impossible, but at the same time magnetic. James had been assigned to the royal fleet as a security officer. His duty was clear: protect the princess from any threat. He had trained for battles, learned strategies, and faced dangerous enemies, but nothing had prepared him for the feeling that stirred in his chest whenever Lyra was near. She moved with grace that no human could imitate. Even the softest gesture of her hand or the slightest tilt of her head commanded attention. Yet she seemed unaware of her effect on anyone. That night the wind was cold, brushing against his uniform as he walked near the balcony. Lyra was already there, staring at the endless darkness of space. He did not want to interrupt, but he could not stop himself. He whispered quietly to himself, almost ashamed, "I wish I had the opportunity to marry her." He had expected nothing. No response, no acknowledgement. But then, to his shock, Lyra turned her head slowly. Her violet eyes caught his, intense and curious, and she asked softly, "You dare to wish that?" James froze. The words were not angry, but they were sharp, like a sudden gust of wind that could knock a man off his feet. And yet behind that sharpness there was curiosity, a hint of something playful. No human had ever dared speak to her this openly, and most certainly no one had whispered such a wish. He swallowed hard, feeling his heart hammering in his chest. He could hear his own breath, loud and uneven, but he managed to say, I do not mean disrespect, Princess. It is just, my heart speaks before I think sometimes." She tilted her head, the soft silver hair falling across her shoulders, and studied him. James felt as though she could see every thought, every memory he had, laid bare in his mind. His cheeks burned, and yet he could not look away from her piercing gaze. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The wind whispered around them, and the distant hum of the palace lights made the night feel endless. Then Lyra stepped closer, her presence overwhelming yet comforting. She did not touch him, but the space between them felt electric. "Few humans are brave enough to speak their hearts," she said softly. "Most are careful, quiet, hidden." Her voice was like music, yet sharp, commanding attention even in its gentleness. James felt a strange mix of fear and hope. He had always known humans were small in the galaxy, ordinary in every way compared to the elegance of alien royalty. And yet here he was, standing close to the most important figure in the system, speaking the truth of his heart. I cannot help it," James whispered. "Every time I see you, Princess, I feel alive. I see more than the crown or the palace walls. I see you, the real you." Lyra's eyes softened just a little. A tiny fleeting smile appeared on her lips. It was so small that a careless observer might have missed it. But to James it felt like a beacon. For the first time he felt that perhaps the impossible, maybe even love across worlds, was possible. The balcony fell silent again, but the air had changed. The night felt alive, charged with something unspoken. Neither dared speak again for a while. Yet in that silence, a connection formed, fragile but undeniable. James looked at the stars, feeling the weight of the galaxy pressing around him, but also feeling the impossible spark of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the heart of a human could reach a princess's soul, and perhaps one day that whisper could become reality. The days that followed were full of tension and quiet longing. James moved through the palace halls with his usual discipline. Yet his eyes kept finding Lyra. She was always there, moving with grace, surrounded by advisors, warriors, and servants, yet somehow untouched by the noise of court life. Her presence demanded attention, but she rarely gave it to anyone willingly. James knew he was just a human, small and ordinary among her people. Still, every time their eyes met, he felt a spark, a quiet pull that made his chest tighten. Lyra, for her part, could not ignore him either. Every human had seemed so fleeting to her, so fragile, so small. But James, he was different. There was courage in the way he looked at her, a stubborn fire that refused to bow to the expectations of alien courts. She found herself drawn to him, and it both thrilled and frightened her. After centuries of being treated as a symbol of duty, here was a human who looked at her as a person, as Lyra, not the princess everyone demanded she be. One evening after the long council meetings, the palace garden glowed under lanterns swaying in the gentle wind. James was walking alone when he saw her, sitting on a marble bench, her hands resting lightly on her knees, eyes on the stars above. She seemed fragile yet untouchable, a paradox he could not ignore. He approached quietly, unsure if he dared to speak, but the pull inside him was stronger than caution. "Princess," he said softly. She looked up, startled, but did not move away. "Human," she said with a faint smile, the way she said it so casual yet so intimate that his heart skipped a beat. I could not stay away," he admitted. "Every time I see you, I feel—" He struggled to find the right words. "I feel alive. I feel that there is more to life than orders, than duty, than fear." Lyra's violet eyes softened, and for a moment she allowed herself to be human. She had been trained to hide emotions, to bow to expectations, to obey the council's plans. But with James, all of that seemed distant, almost meaningless. She wanted to reach out, to touch him, to close the impossible distance between them. "You are reckless," she said lightly, though there was no real anger in her tone. "You know the rules. You know what could happen if anyone saw us like this." "I don't care," James replied. "I care only about you." His voice was steady, filled with the kind of raw honesty that broke through centuries of royal formality. "I know I am just a human. I know I am small. But I would risk everything, for even one moment with you." Her heart ached. She had never expected to feel such a connection with anyone, especially not a human. And yet, standing there under the lanterns, hearing his words, feeling the sincerity of his soul, she realized that perhaps rules and expectations were meaningless if the heart refused to follow them. She took a deep breath and said softly, almost a whisper, "And yet, you dare to speak to me this way. A human, and I feel the same. Every time you are near, I forget the crown, the palace, even the future that has been planned for me." James's hand trembled slightly as he reached toward hers, but did not touch. The moment was fragile, like glass balanced on a knife's edge. Lyra did not pull away. Instead, she allowed herself to lean just a fraction closer, feeling the warmth of his presence. In that quiet garden, under the pale glow of lanterns, something unspoken passed between them. It was more than attraction. It was recognition, understanding, and a shared longing that neither had dared admit before. The rules of the galaxy, the orders of her people, the expectations of centuries, all of it seemed to vanish, and for the first time Lyra allowed herself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the impossible could become reality, that a human could stand beside her not as a protector, not as a servant, but as an equal, as something more. The night deepened around them, but neither moved. They simply sat, hearts racing, sharing the quiet magic of a forbidden connection that neither time nor duty could erase. Peace never lasts long in a galaxy filled with greed and ambition. Rumors had begun to spread like wildfire. A rival alien race, the Korath, were amassing their fleets, planning to invade Lyra's planet and seize her crown. The palace, once filled with calm and order, buzzed with tension. Guards moved faster, messengers ran, and advisors whispered in urgent tones. Lyra could feel the weight of her people pressing down on her. The council demanded a marriage to the alien prince, a union that would guarantee military strength and alliances. But she did not love him, and her heart already belonged to another. James, now constantly at her side, noticed her growing anxiety. Even in her regal composure, he could see the worry etched in the lines of her face. One evening, as they walked through the palace corridors, he spoke quietly, careful not to be overheard. "You don't have to face this alone," he said. "I will fight with you, Princess. I will protect you no matter what the council says, no matter what the galaxy demands." She looked at him, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of fear and relief. "James, it is not just the Korath," she said softly. "It is my people, my duty. If I refuse to marry the prince, my world may descend into chaos. And yet I cannot marry for duty alone. Not my heart." He reached for her hand, hesitant but determined. "Then we fight together. Not for the crown, not for the council, but for what is right, for what we choose." A faint smile appeared on Lyra's lips. It was fleeting, fragile, but it was hope, a rare light in the shadow of looming war. She allowed herself to imagine a life where choices mattered, where love mattered more than duty. Days passed, and the tension in the palace grew unbearable. James trained with the royal guards, learning alien combat techniques, adapting his human skills to unfamiliar weapons and tactics. His determination impressed Lyra's people, who had initially doubted a human could contribute to their defense. Yet even as they prepared for battle, stolen moments between James and Lyra became their sanctuary. Small smiles, lingering glances, shared laughter in empty corridors, each one a rebellion against the rules of duty and expectation. One night, under the quiet light of twin moons, Lyra found James alone on the balcony, staring at the distant stars. His face was set in determination, but his eyes betrayed the worry he tried to hide. "I wish," he whispered almost to himself, "I had the opportunity, the chance to marry you, princess, to stand by your side not just as a protector but as your equal, as your partner." Lyra turned, her breath catching in her throat. No one had ever spoken such words to her, not her advisors, not the alien prince, not anyone. She stepped closer, her hand hovering near his. "Then fight with me, human," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Fight for us, not for duty, not for power. Fight for what your heart believes is right." In that moment, the galaxy, with all its danger and uncertainty, seemed to shrink. Two hearts, human and alien, stood together against impossible odds. Lyra's world, filled with rules and expectations, suddenly had space for choice. And James, small and human in a vast universe, felt larger than he had ever imagined because hope, courage, and love gave him strength beyond measure. As they looked at the stars together, a silent promise passed between them. No matter what the Korith would bring, no matter how powerful the Council's demands, they would face it together. Their bond, fragile but unbreakable, was already stronger than the fears that surrounded them. And in the quiet, under the shadow of impending war, both realized that the greatest battles were not always fought with weapons. Sometimes they were fought with the courage to follow one's heart, even when the galaxy itself tried to stop you. The alarm sounded across the palace just before dawn. The distant red glow of Korith warships filled the sky, casting an eerie light over the city. Lyra stood at the palace walls, her silver hair flowing like liquid light, her violet eyes sharp and unyielding. For the first time, she felt the weight of her crown as both a weapon and a shield. Beside her, James adjusted his armor, a human standing among aliens ready to face a war he had only dreamed of. "This is it," James said quietly, gripping his weapon. No turning back. Lyra nodded, her heart pounding. She had spent her life behind rules and ceremonies, yet now she felt alive in a way nothing in the palace could give her. Standing next to James, she realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the choice to face it. The Korith fleet descended, their ships firing relentless lasers. The sound of alarms, explosions, and the cries of soldiers filled the air. James moved swiftly, dodging energy blasts, helping alien soldiers who had never seen a human fight like this. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for her, for Lyra, for something larger than himself. Lyra, trained in both strategy and combat, directed her forces with precision. Her voice rang out over the chaos, clear and commanding. "Hold the line! Protect the civilians. Do not let them breach the palace walls." Yet in the heart of the battle, disaster struck. A Korith warship crashed through the outer defenses, sending a wave of destruction toward the palace. James, seeing the danger, lunged toward Lyra just as debris rained down. He grabbed her, pulling her behind a fractured wall. Both were bruised, bloodied, but alive. "You're reckless," Lyra shouted, her voice both fear and frustration. "And you inspire me to be," he replied, looking into her eyes. Despite the chaos around them, there was a moment, a heartbeat, where everything else faded. Her violet gaze met his, and for a brief instant the war did not matter. Only the trust and bond between them remained. Together they fought, back to back, a human and an alien princess moving as one. James learned to anticipate her movements, and she adjusted to his human unpredictability. Their synergy became a symbol to the palace defenders. If a human could fight alongside a princess, then courage knew no bounds. Hours passed. The battle raged with no mercy. Explosions shook the ground beneath their feet. Soldiers fell, ships were destroyed, and the sky seemed to burn with the fury of war. Yet through it all, James and Lyra never separated. Every glance, every handhold, every protective gesture reinforced their silent promise. Survive together, no matter the cost. Finally, the Korith fleet began to retreat, their forces broken by the combined human-alien resistance. The palace walls, though battered, had held. Exhausted soldiers cheered, but James and Lyra barely noticed. They were still crouched behind the rubble, faces bruised, clothes torn, hearts still pounding. Lyra reached for James's hand. We made it, she whispered, a mixture of relief and disbelief in her voice. James squeezed her hand gently, his own breath ragged. Yes, together. No matter what comes next, we face it together. And in that moment, amidst the ruin and smoke, something unspoken passed between them. It was more than victory. It was understanding, trust, and a bond forged in fire. They were no longer just princess and protector. They were partners equals, hearts entwined in a galaxy that often demanded conformity. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, reflecting hope where there had been only fear. And for James and Lyra, the battle had not only preserved a kingdom, it had awakened something deeper, something eternal, love born in the heart of chaos, stronger than duty, stronger than war itself. The war had ended, but the silence that followed was heavy. The palace, though still standing, bore the scars of battle, cracked walls, shattered windows, and scorched gardens. Yet within the ruins there was a strange peace, a fragile moment where the world seemed to pause. Lyra walked slowly through the palace garden, her fingers brushing over the fallen petals, her heart still racing from the battle. Every corner held a memory of fear and courage intertwined. James followed her quietly. He did not speak immediately, allowing her the space to process the whirlwind of emotions that had consumed them both. He knew that after surviving the fire of war, words could wait. The unspoken bond between them was stronger than any speech, more powerful than any declaration. Finally, Lyra stopped at the edge of a fountain, the water reflecting the soft light of the twin moons. She looked at James, her violet eyes tired but shining with an intensity that made his chest ache. "It's all over," she whispered. "The council, the war, the future everyone demanded of me." And yet, she trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. James stepped closer, offering his hand without touching her just yet. "And yet?" he prompted gently. Her eyes met his, and for the first time the mask of the princess slipped entirely. "And yet, I don't feel free. I should feel relief, happiness even. But all I feel is the weight of everything I've avoided for so long. And now, I don't know what comes next." James nodded, understanding more than she realized. "You've carried so much for so long," he said softly. "Rules, expectations, fear. And now it's time to let yourself feel, not just duty, not just responsibility, but everything you've hidden. Fear, hope, and even love." Lyra's lips quivered, a tear slipping down her cheek. She had never allowed anyone to see her like this. Not her advisors, not her people, not even the alien prince who sought her hand. Yet here was James, a human, who had fought beside her, who had seen her strength and her vulnerability and still remained. He did not flinch. He did not judge. He simply understood. "I've always tried to be strong," she said, her voice breaking. "Strong enough for my people, for my crown, for the galaxy that expects me to obey. But with you, I don't have to pretend." James finally took her hand in his, feeling the delicate warmth and strength in her fingers. "You don't have to be anyone's princess tonight," he said, voice firm but tender. "Just be Lyra. Be you." She leaned her head on his shoulder, letting herself breathe, letting herself feel. The simple touch, the closeness, it grounded her in a way no ceremony or council meeting ever could. For the first time she felt human, not alien, not royalty, but herself. And in that moment, James felt it too, the connection that went beyond duty or war, something deeper, something eternal. They sat there together in the ruins of the palace garden, hand in hand, hearts slowly calming after the chaos. The world outside could wait. For now, all that mattered was the fragile, unspoken promise forming between them. A promise of trust, understanding, and love that had survived the fire of battle. Lyra whispered finally, "I don't know what the council will say, or what my people will think. But with you, I feel like I could face anything." James smiled, pressing his forehead gently to hers. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes, whatever they demand, we face it side by side." The night deepened around them, the stars reflected in the fountain like tiny lights of hope. In that quiet, tender moment, the weight of kingdoms, wars, and expectations fell away. There were only two hearts, human and alien, learning that vulnerability was not weakness and that love could be the strongest weapon of all. For the first time, both realized that surviving a battle was not the same as living, and in each other, They had found the courage to do both. The council chamber was grand, but its walls seemed to close in on Lyra. Alien nobles and advisors filled every seat, their eyes sharp, their expressions unreadable. At the head of the hall sat the elder counselor, his gaze cold and unwavering. Today the decision would be made. The alien prince, a man of power and influence, waited silently, expecting compliance. Duty demanded Lyra's marriage, a union that would secure the planet's future and maintain the fragile peace. But her heart, for the first time, had other plans. James stood beside her, a human among a sea of alien authority. Some whispered, some stared in disbelief. A human standing here, choosing to stand with the princess? Yet James did not flinch. He had faced enemies before, fought through fire and death, and now he faced centuries of tradition and expectation. His grip on Lyra's hand was firm, a silent promise that he would not let her face this alone. "Princess Lyra," the council elder began, his voice echoing in the chamber, "you are expected to choose a path that serves your people. The alien prince has proven loyalty, power, and stability. Human hearts are fragile and fleeting. Consider wisely." Lyra inhaled deeply. Her gaze met James, the human who had seen her, truly seen her when no one else had. She remembered the garden, the battle, the quiet moments of vulnerability. She remembered the night when he had whispered his wish to marry her, his honesty raw and fearless. She remembered how she had felt alive, free and whole in his presence. And now for the first time she understood that her choice was not just about herself. It was a declaration that the heart could stand against duty, that love could defy destiny. "I will not marry for duty," Lyra said, her voice strong, ringing through the chamber. Every head turned, some in shock, others in anger. "I choose my path, not the one demanded by tradition, not the one forced by fear. I choose the one who has stood beside me, who has seen me, who has fought for me, and who loves me for who I am. Not my crown, not my people, but me." The room fell silent. Whispers rose and fell, but Lyra did not falter. She lifted her chin, feeling the eyes of centuries of expectation pressing down, and yet she felt lighter than she ever had. She turned fully to James. "You, human, will you accept this path with me, to walk beside me not as a protector but as my partner?" James swallowed, the weight of centuries of tradition and doubt heavy on his shoulders. Yet his heart was steady. "Yes," he said, voice strong, eyes locked on hers. "I will marry you, Princess Lyra, not for power, not for duty, but for us. For love. For everything we've fought to survive together." The council gasped. The alien prince looked furious, his jaw tightening, but Lyra did not waver. Her people watched, some shocked, some moved, as centuries of rigid expectation were challenged by a human and a princess who refused to bow to fear. James stepped closer, holding her hands firmly. "Whatever comes," he said softly, "we face it together." Lyra smiled, tears glistening in her violet eyes. "Together," she whispered, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. In that moment, the chamber that had seemed oppressive and intimidating became a place of triumph, not just for victory over enemies, but for victory of the heart. Love, courage, and humanity had stood stronger than duty, stronger than expectation, stronger than tradition. The whispers of doubt began to fade, as even the elder counselor nodded subtly. Perhaps he recognized that true strength was not in obedience or alliances, but in the courage to choose one's heart. James and Lyra, human and alien, stood together, hands intertwined, hearts aligned. They had defied destiny not with weapons but with courage, trust, and love. The galaxy might never forget that a human dared to love a princess, and that a princess dared to love back. And in that silent triumph, they knew their future would be theirs alone to shape, together, unbroken and unafraid. Years had passed since the battle, since the council, and since the moment they had defied destiny together. The palace had been rebuilt, stronger and brighter than before, reflecting not just the glory of a kingdom but the courage and love of its rulers. James and Lyra walked through the gardens hand in hand, the twin moons casting silver light over the blossoms, their faces calm yet full of unspoken memories. It had not been easy. Many still whispered about the human who married a princess, questioning if he truly belonged in her world. But James never wavered, and Lyra, no longer bound only by duty, stood taller, her eyes filled with quiet pride. Together they had shown that love, courage, and humanity could endure even the harshest of galaxies. "Do you remember the first time we spoke?" James asked softly, his voice carrying the warmth of countless shared days and nights. Lyra smiled, her violet eyes glinting with mischief and memory. "How could I forget?" she said. "You whispered something impossible, something human. And yet it reached me." James laughed lightly, shaking his head. "I never thought my foolish words could change the course of a kingdom, or of your life." She turned to him, her hands still holding his. "It wasn't foolish," she said gently. "It was brave, just like you." They walked quietly along the palace fountain, the water reflecting the stars above. The soft night breeze carried the scent of flowers and the faint echo of a past battle. They had fought not only for their survival, but for the right to be themselves, to choose each other freely in a universe that often demanded sacrifice and conformity. And now here they were, human and alien, ruler and partner equal and united. "I still can't believe it," James whispered, looking at her with awe. I have you. And I have you," Lyra replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "A human, who has more courage than most kings, more love than most rulers. You are my choice, my heart, my strength." They stopped by a marble bench sitting together under the twin moons. James gently brushed a strand of her silver hair from her face, his fingers lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. In that quiet, tender moment, they did not need words. Their past, their battles, their sacrifices, all of it was contained in the simple, profound truth of being together. "Whatever comes next," James murmured, "we face it together always." "Always," Lyra echoed, her hand tightened around his. "No counsel, no enemy, no expectation. Nothing can take this from us." The palace gardens, once scarred by war, now seemed alive with promise. Flowers bloomed, lanterns glowed, and the water sparkled as if reflecting their joy. The stars above shone brighter, a quiet celebration of two hearts who had dared to defy the impossible. As they sat there, the galaxy around them seemed smaller, kinder, as if acknowledging that courage and love could bridge any distance, overcome any barrier, and withstand the tests of time. James and Lyra had done more than survive. They had lived, truly lived, and in doing so, had inspired their people to believe that even a human heart could stand equal to the stars. James pressed his forehead gently against hers, their breaths mingling in the soft night air. "I whispered once that I wished I could marry you," he said, voice low and full of reverence. "And now, I have you. Truly." Lyra smiled, tears glistening, and whispered back, "And I whispered once that I would fight with you. And here we are, together human, together forever." In that simple, quiet embrace, the universe felt right. The battles, the wars, the whispers of doubt, they no longer mattered. There were only two hearts intertwined against time and fate, promising a future that neither duty nor destiny could take away. And as the twin moons shone above, James and Lyra knew this truth. Love was not weakness, it was courage. It was not fleeting, it was eternal. And in each other they had found the greatest victory of all.